full session. Hello, everyone. Thank you for staying. We have a wonderful group here to answer your questions and talk more. I will not going to introduce everybody, but I will introduce Barbara Fuchs, the UCLA Diversifying Come on up, actually. Come up. I'll be down here. I'll come down here like I have, like Phil Donahue, maybe. I'll be down here.
Who's that?
I have to take a test.
Yes. I wish I had a microphone now.
Get your cheers, half off.
There you go.
You're safe.
Don't fall. This is great. You all did an amazing job with that. Okay. Excuse me. Do you want to move over here so you can see that I won't stand in your way? Sorry, we're not used to doing readings in the thrust configuration, so thank you for bearing with us. Well, why don't we first? Could you all just introduce yourselves? I know you just performed, but it's just to tell us who you are, and we'll give you a round of applause.
I'm Darryl Daughtry Jr.
Hi, I'm Jimonn Cole. God, hi, Sean Runnette.
Hi, Maria-Christina Oliveras.
Isabel, Arraiza. Durso.
We skipped over Robin Kello.
Yes,
Yes.
and one of the translators.
One of the
Honor to be part of
Our wonderful director. Thank you. So maybe, Barbara, if I could just start with you. I would hand you my Phil Donahue microphone if I could. Could we talk a little bit about why this play? I mean, it was really wonderful, and I think Noah, are you still here? Noah's here. I'll steal your comment. Noah called it the Spanish Golden Age Cymbeline, which I thought was kind of fun. But I wonder what first attracted you and the working group at UCLA to this particular Lope de Vega play.
Yeah, this one has an interesting story. So in general, in this project, we try to promote Hispanic classical theater. We really want to go for plays that we think will be irresistible to theater companies. We try to find plays that we think will be irresistible to theater makers and to audiences. We are very attentive to plays that have a centering of female agency, since that's an interesting contrast with Shakespeare, because in Spain there were actresses and female writers writing for the commercial stage, directors of companies, etc. And so this play was discovered by a Spanish scholar and theater maker, and he brought it to his acting class. And they loved it so much that they formed an acting company around it. And 2 years ago, we brought that production in Spanish to La Escena, and it was a huge hit. It was an amazing production. And so a couple of years ago, when we were thinking about what to translate next, someone in the group said, we should translate El Animal de Hungría, since we sort of had the rare experience of having seen it already and having seen how attractive it was, and what an acting company could do with it. So this one has a slightly different path than usual.
It's really fun, and none of us had heard of it before. None of the actors had heard of it. You'd never heard of it before, of course, because it hadn't been. Nadia, had you heard of it? No.
Mm-mm.
So when Nathan called and said, "Hey, would you like to direct this reading?" Well, why don't you give us?
It was new to me. I think I was attracted by this idea that this girl grew up in nature and didn't have to deal with any of the stuff that you and I have to deal with, She didn't have to wait in line at the DMV, or, she's really connected to nature in a beautiful way. And I think that monologue about what she sees at court is really lovely. And I kind of wish that we could all remove that filter and see the world through her eyes, because we should be examining those things. And I think she does it so beautifully, and it's so poignant. And I asked everybody what their favorite animal was at the top of rehearsal, domesticated or otherwise, because I think it's just a small way to connect to nature, I think it's beautiful. Yeah. And very I don't know. I was like, dang, okay, but this cast is amazing. So like, thank you, Nathan, for basically casting this because he did a great job.
Yeah. I agree, and thank you. Any actors? I mean, there's some wonderful to have you all here at this discussion. Any experiences from within it? I know you just dove in and did it today with 5 hours of rehearsal, right? So pretty amazing. Any feedback or thoughts or discoveries about it that you want to share? Anyone?
I'd say, as you just described, that it is an attractive piece of text. From the inside, it flows. Really, it's very fluid. And so it's easy to visualize, it's easy to start to connect with, and easy to move with. So I think you all have done a wonderful job in the translation.
What questions do we have from our audience? Yes, Judith.
I'd like to ask the question of the translators. I thought it was really wonderful, and it didn't feel rigid, and the register seemed right, and it seemed to me the actors didn't have any trouble getting their mouths around the words and so on and so forth. So I'm wondering if you felt you were adjusting slightly in the English that you came up with to make it work for a contemporary audience.
Yeah, so we intend to translate for performance. We want it to make sense in an English idiom that is familiar, and so we wanted to be able to hit those strange heights of the philosophical kind of almost the speeches for Saura makes, for example, are so deeply invested in ways of knowing. The ways of knowing that come from the Greco-Roman tradition, but at the same time, we want, as you just said so wonderfully, like we want there to be this sense of like, what is DMV? I will tear DMV apart. DMV is the and I think
and that's so punk rock. Like
yeah,
I feel like she's
yeah,
super punk rock, and I'm
yeah,
like about it.
And I think I think the thing is, and I see this in the Lope original. I think that plays often have sort of a character who will guide you through the play to help the audience see how the play works. I think, for example, like Bottom in Midsummer is this kind of character. I think Rosaura is our character, and so she is saying, "What is this? How can this be?" And that registers simultaneously at a deep level of what is this? How can this be? But also like what's going on here in a kind of a comic immediacy. I think so. Yeah, we want it to work on both levels.
Other questions or observations? Yes, Suzanne.
So I have a thought that I'm not sure how to put it exactly, but there's so many of these little parts, theatergrams, little things that you see in other plays, like the baby that's found that has some. Well, this one doesn't have wrappings or any jewels like in Winter's Tale. There's no proof of the identity there, which is interesting. No identity tokens. But then Felipe has the clothes that he was in. So I just kind of wondered whether Barbara knows or any of you know, like Lope's connection. I'm just guessing that there's some sort of Italian play that may have some of these tropes, or maybe this is partly from a chronicle myth. I just kind of wondered. It felt like familiar ground in a very unfamiliar and incredibly cool place.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's almost like he's turning that kaleidoscope of the motif, right? So you get the boy's version is much more traditional,
right?
And there's all of this telling the boy about his,
right? He knows
the more or less veiled ways,
right.
And then I think that the idea that the world is so dangerous for Rosaura, and that it really matters that it not be revealed, and,
right?
And that I think instead of you have a mole, or I have your trinkets,
right.
the witnessing, right, that Teodosia brings to that scene, right, that's the most powerful thing. I've been saying to several people that scene is actually very reminiscent of A Winter's Tale, right?
Yes.
This is the queen who's been dead for 20-some years, and there she is, you know. And that's an incredibly powerful moment.
I'm sort of curious how this play does feel so Shakespearean in some ways, and I'm just wondering how connected Spanish and English theater would have been in this period. They are roughly contemporary, but do you know?
Yeah, so in the period, it's mostly England looking to Spain, which to us feels very unfamiliar because of the centrality of Shakespeare in our own time. But in the period, there's Italy, from which they both take in the first place, and there's Italian traveling companies going to both places, to Spain and to England. So it makes perfect sense that they would have a lot of elements in common. And then there's a bunch of English writers, more Fletcher and some of those Japanese that Jesse specializes in, taking plots from Spanish novellas, perhaps even more than plays. Maybe because the circulation of text, right, is easier. Those books come back to England. So it's a little bit the opposite, right? We can point to more English plays based on Spanish sources rather than the other way around. But they are both drinking at that, Italian and classical.
Yeah. So for the Gen Zs out there, that means when Justin Bieber joined the Despacito song that already existed. That's what that is.
Thank you. And let me ask, I can never keep the dates straight. When is Calderon and Life is a Dream in comparison to this Barbara Brotman? Because there are some other similarities with like Segismundo and Rosora, their story.
So I mean, we're talking hundreds of plays, right? So the idea that these motifs are constantly recirculated should not surprise you. I think at the conference we just had with Escena in LA, someone was saying most plays would be on stage for 3 days. A really good play might get a week. And then Lope had to deliver another one because the audience was clamoring for them, right? So it's that many plays. So this is early in Lope's production. We don't know exactly when, but this is considered an early play for Lope. So 1590s, right around the turn of the 17th century, and then Calderon is after Lope. So Calderon is
so he would have seen this play, probably. He might have.
He might have.
Yeah.
We don't know anything
don't
about
know.
the early production history of this play, unfortunately. We don't have any
Because
information.
it seems
about
like Segismundo owes a lot to her character, don't you think?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that opening scene in that play on the mountain with the
Discovering the, right. Other questions or comments? Yes, right here.
What about the translation, which was great? Was there any abridgments, any cuts, or is this a full thing?
Cuts.
Oh, everyone's looking at me. I showed up this morning and because they got sent a cut script, but then I was like, hello everybody, I cut with girlish glee. And, but I just felt like I wanted to keep it moving. I wanted to keep it very kinetic and connected to, like, if Felipe makes a very strong thought about how he feels about his father, I want his father to continue that sentiment. So I was mining and cutting for that.
It was actually fascinating. I was at the rehearsal and it was really interesting to see a director go through that process because we are all for that. We translate everything because in most cases we're the first and only English translation. And so we would like to offer the entire text for a director to play with.
It's so fun.
But then it's really interesting to see what principles might guide a director and to get to sort of eavesdrop on that. We would not want nothing more than for the text to be cut into its most agile version.
I just feel like their declarations are so strong, and I just feel like there's something very fun about, I don't know, I once upon a time I was an actor, but like I think the classical plays, they make these sort of like value beliefs and like these value sets, even like I'm allergic to water, So I just feel like there's all these little beautiful things that feel classical but can also connect to us contemporarily.
Judy, you had your hand up.
So I have a more mechanical question, sorry, because I love this, let me just tell you. Great choice, and you guys did a fabulous job. There's like 35 characters in the cast. And some of you played 6 of them. So I have not seen that much doubling up, and I have to admit, halfway through I started saying, minor character, don't care who you are, what's the accent? That way I know whether you're a peasant or a guard or a nobleman or a Scotsman. Really did help.
Very clear.
But how would that have played on stage?
So I think that the companies were large, and there were apprentices, very similar to in Shakespeare's time, and doubling and playing multiple roles I think was very standard then as well.
But 36 for.
No, there aren't really 36 roles. So what is interesting about this play is that there's a lot of different settings, and all of those have their entourage, right? So you have to have enough villagers to make a village council, and you have to have enough courtiers to make a court, but I think there's a lot of wearing multiple hats.
Yes, in the back.
When you produced it in Spanish in California, did you cut it at all, or you didn't?
So I was not involved in the artistic side of the production. We just invited them to bring their production. I think there's a little more, well, no, I shouldn't say this. I don't actually know what percentage of the text they cut. It also felt very lively, but they did all kinds of exciting things. Like they started with the act of appropriation, but still the kind of New Zealand haka, like they have before, a rugby game, and so like the sense that you were in some kind of space of incredibly intense energy that was established in like 2 seconds, and then they were off and running. And what they found, I think, a real challenge in the production was the 20-year break, which, in the reading we didn't worry about very much. So one of my favorite moments in that production was they made a little song, and then they come in and one of the characters blows dust into, talcum powder into the hair of Lando. And he's old, and it was just like beautifully poetic, visual moment. But it is one of the, this is a young Lope. He's doing a lot of crazy things.
That's good. Yes.
I was curious about the ending, whether there were cuts in that final scene, the recognition scene when she comes and says, "Here I am, Theodosia," because of the connection to this, not only because, but it relates to The Winter's Tale and this sense of time passing, and they all go, "Oh, immediately it's you," but then there's the question of how much she's aged. She doesn't have to. So I just wondered, is it as short in the original as it felt here? Because here it felt like it was pretty brief, and I wondered how much more space it had, or Lope just wanted to just, okay,
No, because
we're at that
literally,
moment.
he's just like, and now the play is over.
Right.
It's very meta. We're all like,
Yeah.
okay, thank
Yeah. Sort of happy end kind of moment.
My recollection of the final scene, that moment of recognition, is actually not cut. It was played almost exactly.
That's what I wondered.
And then Felipe's like, just kidding, bye. And
That's that. Question here.
Yeah, I didn't have a question, it's more a comment, and just as an actor writer myself, I just want to say that the synergy of Nadia's work and the translation was so beautiful, because I was so satisfied with the unraveling at the end and the musicality of how it all came together. It was like that feeling, yes, and now that person's going to come out. We're going to find out why. Go, fight for her. And it was beautifully done, so I don't know if plan it was or not, and I know that feeling of the cutting and it doesn't really, when you're in the rehearsal room, it's kind of just part of the course, but I was extremely satisfied, so thank you.
Yeah, agree. Yes.
Am I understanding right that this was not performed in Spain or?
We don't have any record of it, so it may well have been, but we don't have any record of it. It was done at UC Davis in Spanish a few years ago, and the only other modern performance that we know of is the one in Violet, which is the company we brought to LA.
Well, we hope to inspire more. Yes, Sophia.
I wanted to ask, especially to those of you who have experienced other previous productions of this, if there was a particular beauty of bringing it to life in this kind of reading format, because it didn't feel incomplete at all. Like obviously there have been fuller productions with costumes and sets and everything else, but this felt like such an opportunity to bring the text to life. So was there a beauty in that?
I mean, I'm always amazed at how much happens in this very short rehearsal period, because, we have certainly all seen readings that, people stand or sit at a chair, and this is like so close to it's just giving us so much to work with, imaginatively, and you guys do so much. So, it's just very good.
And I'll just add, you have a very good director, and you have some of the best actors you can find anywhere. And that's one of them. This might be your first Revelation reading that you've ever attended, and if I can modestly say, that's often what these are like, because a lot of the plays that we do, revelation readings of, whether they're from the Spanish Golden Age or the Elizabethan or Jacobean era, they were written for theaters that didn't have a lot of scenery or props, and so they really had to fly on the tongues of, on the vocal cords, on the words expressed by great actors. And you walk on stage and you say, well, 20 years have passed, and yes, and we just go, yeah, 20 years have passed. I don't need. That's a wonderful effect that Barbara just elaborated on, but you don't need it, because what you really just need is a wonderful actor who's able to dive in and embody the language and the character and tell the story. And sometimes, sometimes the readings are a breath of fresh air, because I think for all of us, because you don't get caught up in 4 weeks of rehearsal, which is what we'd all prefer to have if we're directing and acting a play. We'd prefer to have that time, but you can sometimes get lost in a labyrinth of indecision or wrong blind alleys. Whereas in a reading like this, well, you just have to make a choice and go for it. And so often, and usually, because we've got great actors here and great directors here, those first instincts are often the right ones. And you could spend 4 weeks in rehearsal second guessing those first instincts, and, and so, we've all been there. So I think I'm rambling a little bit, but I think that that's one of the reasons these revelation readings tend to work when they work, and it sounds like it did for you, so I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. And this will be, I'm getting the signal, and I'm around to, if there's any last burning questions or comments? Jill? Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question of this, because what you were just saying about the difference between a reading and a full production. I wanted to ask of all the actors, but especially of Rosalba and Theodosia, because you all were able to, you created a physicality, a grammar of movement that expressed character, and that you were fully languaged as a human, but also had these kinds of ways of being that were you had been living out in the woods and stuff. So I was wondering how just on one day you were able to create this kind of way of expressing character that was so full and rich and fun for the audience, I think.
I mean, I'm just all about make a choice, go for it. Yeah. Wrong but wrong, maybe? Question marks. That's what we do. So it's just that's what's so joyous about the text. Like the text, for me personally, to ride the actual text because it was so beautifully translated. I wasn't in my head about like, oh, gotta make that work. I just played with the language behind it, right, and the action intention behind it, and played with my.
I wanted to say that after and congratulate both of you, because I just got the email like 24 hours ago, and so I read it in Spanish, and I only have time to read it in Spanish, so now I'm going to confess it, I'm going to be candid about it. It was sort of like a cold read for me. I hadn't had time with the text in English, and it was so rich that I think what I was creating was based on sort of the construction of the language that you guys did so beautifully. And so I was like, oh, okay, here I go. And yeah, so thank you for that.
That's what Jesse said. It's like impulse. It's all impulse. We didn't read many of these scenes.
We didn't have time.
Literally during the thing. So we were discovering it with each other. And once you make a choice and live in that choice, then you just write the story. Right. Then you throw yourself in. So it's a tribute to this particular translation as well.
Yeah. You did that beautifully. Thank you. Yes, thank you. And thank you online. Thank you all for coming. I hope to see you at Nadia.